It was clearly a big night for the president last night. What was your takeaway?
I mean, first of all, I love to be right. And I have been for so long like, the guy's actually really good and you're going to be shocked. So there was a moment where I was sitting there going like, if I'm wrong, this is going to be really embarrassing. So I was really happy. I thought he did a great job. There were some lines in there that were really good. His delivery was, I thought, really good. But there were things that stuck out to me. Like, you can't only love this country when you win, which he said before, but is a really good line. And the only Republican clapping, Mitt Romney, right? So there were so many times where we talked about things.
The Republican most likely to potentially endorse Joe Biden.
Right. And also the only really one of the very few Republicans who still believes in what we're supposed to be doing in this country, you know, this larger democracy. So I thought that was really good. I also, when he said, if you don't want the money for your districts,
we'll take it on back.
Yeah,
yes.
That was amazing. There were a lot of things where I was like looking at Mike Johnson and he couldn't clap like the lead pipes, right? Like taking the lead out of the water for children. Like
he couldn't clap for let's have every third grader in America reading and let's expand tutoring. I'm pretty sure everybody can give that one a round of applause, especially if you're about family values.
It really showed the place that Trumpism has put the Republican Party. And I thought that was really interesting.
Maya, I know ahead of the speech, you really wanted the president to urge people to understand how important it is to protect democracy. And there he was in the room, standing before Congress where the insurrection happened 3 years ago. Do you think he got that point home?
Oh, yeah. And I just want to say, Molly is always right because she supported me from there.
There you go. There you go.
So just saying.
Okay, good.
No, but Molly is totally right about what he delivered. But to this point, he started with democracy in such an interesting way, and it took me aback. Because he started with Ukraine, and I thought, wait, he's running for president. What's he doing?
Yeah.
And then it became very elegantly clear that he was starting with this theme of democracy in the context of his sub-theme, which was history. And it was history, not just history that we are in terms of our period, but what history are we going to make?
Because he's also underscoring, I may be older, but I'm wiser.
Well, and we'll come back to the end of his speech. But he did that, but he linked it and immediately made it not just a foreign policy issue, which is why I was surprised. I thought that bold move when most Americans don't vote on foreign policy. But he quickly brings it into January 6th and the insurrection, which is what sets up his point about you can't just love this country when you win, which is not only a differentiator, but it's also what's at stake in terms of democracy. And I will say, as someone who also said, I want to hear him say it. I want to hear him say that it's about our right to vote. I want to hear him say.
He sure did.
And I wanted to hear him say the John Lewis Voting Advancement Act, the Freedom to Vote Act, because the other point is the reason we have the big lies that are just old lies. They're not even new lies about voter fraud and, you know, that great Seth Meyers setup before the State of the Union when he reminds us of all of Trump's indictments. But underneath them is all of this big lie trying to take an election. And he's reminding us of that in January 6th, but he's reminding us in a way that brings it back to all the fundamentals of what lawmaking is and what leadership is and what protecting democracy is, and that it's for all of us. And I can't, because when he looks at the Supreme Court, and the justices are sitting there, okay, I was like,
you didn't think you were going to get that out of Joe Biden?
I did not think I was going to get that, but when he said, yeah, the Supreme Court, you said, you know, women are not without electoral power. No kidding, which was also a message to talk about. But it's what we all needed to hear, because these are fundamentals. It's the first fundamental right we've ever had taken from us in the history of this country. And that was what he made clear throughout. But he pulled it back to what does it do for us on an everyday living point? Well, how does it change our lives? You actually mentioned the one, Stephanie, that I was going to say, which was, yeah, he talked about our kids learning in school. He talked about the things that Democrats, frankly, have dropped the ball on. All Republicans have done is weaponize education rather than, and not made it about education for all of us, made it about how education can be a weapon to divide us. And he brought us back to what government's supposed to do for us.
Shouldn't everybody read? Christine, he did talk a lot about the economy. How do you think he did?
You know, I think he met people at their kitchen table. And I think last year when he talked about airline fees and hidden fees and junk fees, that was in the speech last year. And it was sort of criticized as small ball. I mean, come on, people feel terrible about the economy. And he did it again, but trying to show, look, Wall Street's at record highs. He never mentioned Wall Street. But on the same day Wall Street hit record highs, he's talking about nickeled and dimed Americans and what his policies are going to do. You know, big picture and small picture. All these different fees, but also tax policy and tax fairness, as he calls it. So I think he reset the table, honestly, on both the economy and the overall, I think, agenda for a second term. I think he did well on the economy. I also think that people are starting to feel less terrible about the economy. I mean, the state of the economy is strong. The state of the American perception of the economy is skeptical at best.
Bingo.
Right? And so there's this big Grand Canyon that he has to kind of, navigate. It's not a needle to thread. It is a Grand Canyon between how people feel and what's really happening. And I think, yesterday he just reset the table for that conversation.
So he took us to the kitchen table and then he reset it. I really like that. I like that.
When he talked about Snickers bars, you go to the snack machine.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? I feel
good.
like that was a huge part of this, like just making it really concrete for people.
Yeah,
You know?
Republicans, besides saying that he was speaking too loud, they argued, how could he make this so partisan, so political? Wow, I think it was Michael Steele who said at the top of the show, Marjorie Taylor Greene was in full campaign gear. And the last time Donald Trump gave a State of the Union address, he literally gave a medal to Rush Limbaugh.
Right.
So given that those are the arguments against President Biden's speech that Republicans are giving, is that them conceding he got that one?
Well, I mean, let's be clear. It's not that he did something new here. He accepted the terms of the speech. Over the last decade, this speech has changed. It used to be when I was growing up, you sat there, it was like going to church, right? That's not what it's like right now. What it's like right now is some guy is going to get up and call you a liar. Marjorie Taylor Greene is going to get up and wear her MAGA hat. That is what the State of the Union is now. It is political performance. And I think that's really important to talk about because I think we have to linger a bit in how a lot of people were feeling before this speech.
Nervous.
Right? So nervous. We were feeling like, this is someone who's older, and also this is a rerun. Like, we've been here before, so simultaneously dread and boredom. Okay? That's what we were going into this speech with.
Dread, boredom, lack of enthusiasm. Wow, Mary, you really made it set up for a great night.
Yeah, right? But I mean, that also gives him a pretty low bar to clear,
Right.
which he did. And I think that performance was really important. He really used the foils of the Republican Party and just stepped up to them. And that was really important. You know, I feel like before this speech, I was thinking about this election kind of the way, like I was like, I really need to reset how I think about elections. I'm used to falling in love with candidates. You know, maybe I really need to think about this more like how the Wall Street Journal talks about marriage. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yes,
you just need to
yes.
make a decision and accept the tax benefit. Do you know what I'm saying?
Okay, but someone else spoke last night, and whether she had a high bar or a low bar, I think it's safe to say, and I'm not giving an overarching opinion, she did not clear it. It was the Republican response. Alabama Senator Katie Britt, and let's just share a bit of it.
The true, unvarnished state of our union begins and ends with this. Our families are hurting. Our country can do better.
I'm almost afraid to continue because Molly's going to set herself on fire. Obviously, her remarks were widely panned, but it was her fellow Alabama Senator, Tommy Tuberville, today, who said he was saying she did a good job, and he said she was picked as a housewife, not just a senator.
Yes.
Somebody who sees it from a different perspective. So first of all, let's just say this. In Katie Britt, there's nothing wrong with being a housewife.
No.
She's not a housewife. She is a U.S. senator. But how telling is this, that this is where Republicans want to weave us to? You know, let's go back to that kitchen where that mother is, where that woman is, where she should be flanked by her children, because that's a woman's place. Is that the message they were trying to send us last night?
I mean, they're a mess. Look, everything that's not Trump in this party is a mess. And they
You think he's not?
I mean, he's a mess, too,
Oh.
but at least Trump is a thing. Whereas everything else is like not Trump in the Republican Party, but still Trumpy. So they didn't have a lot of great choices. Remember, they liked her because she was young and a woman and didn't seem too crazy. Right?
And beautiful.
Right. And you couldn't put Marjorie Taylor Greene there. I mean, you can't put Lauren Boebert there. There are not a ton of choices, and a lot of these Republicans are retiring.
Christine, put personality aside. President Biden's economy is clearly outperforming Donald Trump's. Why do you think it doesn't translate?
You know, I think COVID stole our optimism. I think 4 years ago today, we were shutting things down, and what we've lived through, more than 1 million Americans dead, has stolen our ability to look at the bright side of things, and we've become comfortable with discomfort and with not knowing what's going to happen next. And I think that's reflected in every single poll. You know, I can tell people the economy is strong. GDP is stronger than it has been strong for 3 years. We didn't have a recession. We withstood a banking crisis. And they say, yeah, and they give me the stink face. You know, nobody believes it. And that's because COVID, I'm convinced COVID stole our optimism, and it will take time to heal that.
Maya, Republicans, though, they're playing up this contrast, you know, look back 4 years. Just watch this.
Are you better off today than you were 4 years ago? The answer for hardworking Americans across the country is a resounding no.
We have to go back to that future, 2017 to 2020. We want those 4 years one more time.
People remember how good things were when Donald Trump was president.
Folks have done better under Trump than they've done under Biden.
America was stronger when President Trump was in office.
I don't even need to rattle off all the economic facts because I torture our audience with it every night. But 4 years ago, our schools were closed. Our businesses were closed. Unemployment was up here. The future seemed bleak. We've had a better economic recovery than any country in the developed world. What do you make of this, that somehow we've forgotten it?
So sadly, it seems that if you say a lie often enough, some people start to think it was true. And I'm not saying that's because Americans aren't. I actually think that was a brilliant way of saying it. It's like we have lost so much of that optimism. But I also think it's one of the things President Biden did last night was remind people of the amazing recovery we made. I mean, because as we know, it wasn't just that our kids weren't in school and we were isolated at home. It's that people were dying. I mean, dying. We're in a city that had refrigeration trucks sitting on corners and where, to this day, many of us still have the sound of sirens ringing in our ears because those sirens were ringing non-stop, even when no one was in the streets, because most people were too afraid to be in them. I mean, like that's what we came back from. And, you know, he also said this when he talked about what was in that recovery. I mean, reducing child poverty by 40%. Like 40%. We were already the shame of the globe by virtue of our wealth, that we had so many children going hungry. I mean, keeping people in their homes because they were actually getting a check to make sure that they were able to still buy food and put it on the table and make sure they did not become homeless. I mean, those were the things that we did, and that's what we have to remind.
But Christine, here's what's interesting. Even if you look ahead at what Donald Trump's proposed policies are, mass deportation, that will hurt our labor shortage and make life more expensive. Tariffs, that is going to hurt, again, inflationary. And then you look back and say, but what is it that people are so connected to? Well, sure, big business likes him for corporate tax cuts and deregulation. Do people understand what he's looking to do from an economic standpoint? Because it won't help the everyday consumer.
I think that most people just see his strength that he projects, and that's what they relate to, honestly. I also think there's something that has happened in the past 4 years, and that grocery prices. Inflation is still, prices are 17% higher overall right now than they were everywhere you go. Grocery store prices are up 25%. Gas prices are down, but groceries, I think that those inflation scars are still pretty fresh, and that feeds into this feeling that things were better under Trump. And we didn't have to pay so much for ground beef and eggs under Trump. And we can explain all the reasons why, and that inflation is starting to moderate, but that's not how they say it.
Every single time I'm on the phone with my mother, she is telling me the price of ground beef and eggs every time. Because it is expensive. Chicken wings every time I talk to her. Forget just the economy. But think about the chaos that ensued every single day that President Trump was in office. President Biden has a war chest of campaign dollars behind him. If he spent the next 242 days using all of his social media outlets and every media outlet reminding the American people, Donald Trump said this, Donald Trump said that, would that be the reminder that people need?
Maybe. I mean, like, I think about tariffs, for instance, which Trump is promising to do again. He did that the first time around. I think that if you look at the reports about it, everyone agrees it led to unemployment. So, but then COVID came in.
It led to a giant farm aid bill that he had to put through because farmers were suffering.
But Biden kept them on. But Biden kept them all on, too.
Good
so
point.
the policy didn't really change.
Right. Yeah. And then the thing is that he's promising to do more, but we kind of memory hold what happened because of it. Do you know what I mean? Like, COVID came, it's a huge emergency. It kind of clears the decks in your brains. And you're not thinking about tariffs. And so you're like, hold it, tariffs, we did that before. You know? I think that's what's happening.
Donald Trump did a spectacularly bad job with COVID. Like, shockingly bad. And in fact, our death rate was significantly higher than it should have been. So, and you know, it's funny because I heard him give a speech where he said, and I didn't get any credit for COVID. And I'm thinking to myself, you're very lucky that you didn't get any credit.
But isn't that funny? There's more talk about what a bad job Anthony Fauci did or things that we did wrong. And you don't actually hear that much about what a terrible job the president at the time did, even acknowledging that we were going through a pandemic.
And by the way, he could have just not politicized it. He could have said, like, this is a pandemic. We don't know. There's a lot of stuff we don't know, and we're sort of learning as we go, which was the sort of truth. But instead, he told his people that this was political and that they could take ivermectin and not wear masks. I mean, there was these people were so taken advantage of. And many, many, many hundreds of thousands died.
Can we also remember that it was Donald Trump as a president who helped contribute to the rise of anti-Asian hate and violence by calling it, you know, by associating it with China.
He called it the China virus.
He called it the China virus. You know, so all of that, what people were experiencing and feeling, and isolation and fear, and all those things, for some folks, got turned completely in the most horrific way against.
Okay, but when you say that, it makes me think back to 4 years ago. Because right now, people are like, well, I'm not excited about Joe Biden. I don't love Joe Biden. People weren't excited about him 4 years ago.
No.
They were voting against Donald Trump, and they were voting for competency, normalcy. Have we forgotten that as we're going, Joe's just not exciting enough for me?
I mean, I think last night was the Joe Biden that got elected in 2020. And we just need to see more of that. Because he was, look, policy makes good politics. He's got a lot of good policy, right? I mean, you live in some of these states, they're building bridges, they're building, I mean, the chip stuff is very boring, but we brought manufacturing, they've brought manufacturing back to America. That's a huge deal. And so I do actually think there's a lot of really good policy. If he gets out there and screams about it, by the way, I love the screaming. He should scream all the time. If he gets out there and screams about it, I think that will go far.
But then how does he balance, right? He wants to be projecting Joe Biden, you know, looking forward, inspiring people, while at the same time reminding them of where we were and what we had. Because it's interesting. You've got two basically incumbents running against one another.
Yeah, I mean, it's an unprecedented situation because how do you see this election? Is this an election where you have two incumbents? Is this an election where you have, you know, someone who's been running a race like Donald Trump against other people? How do you see his success? Is he successful enough? All those things. But I think what's interesting and what you saw him getting in that speech last night was something that's really important for us to pay attention to when it comes to the economy. Perry Bacon had a really interesting article in the Post a couple weeks back where he basically said, why can't Democrats run on the economy? Why is this a problem? And he said, because they need to address the fundamental insecurity people feel. People are seeing their grocery bills go up. People are seeing their housing costs go up. And he started hitting that really hard.
Try to buy a house. It's hard.
Exactly. He needs to get to that fundamental insecurity because, frankly, Donald Trump does address that. He addresses it head on. And so
How?
But he said title insurance, for example, you know, like title insurance fees. The White House thinks that they can waive those without Congress and they can save families like $400, $500. Like that's what they're going after. They're going after the ways they can use the levers of power without Congress that will not help.
And but they have to tell people that they're doing it, right? So when my when I don't have junk fee, when I don't have, when my credit card fees are capped and I'm looking at my bill, am I really going to think, Joe Biden did that for
So
me.
will it
Just
land?
like when I get a
That's the big
raise,
question,
I say,
right?
well, that's because I'm so good at my job, not because the government.
He just has to make
true.
sure they put his name and let him sign.
Like when you build a bridge and it says brought to you
Guess
by-
what? It was a good move.
It was.
Donald Trump put his name on those
He
stimulus
was
checks,
great.
and he gets credit for it, though it was Nancy Pelosi who pushed it.